Welcome back to The Serial Entrepreneur. I'm your host, Anna Wood. On today's episode, I'm joined by Sergey Jakimov, founding and managing partner of LongeVC. We discuss the journey from serial founder to investor, the longevity space and the innovations that will change lives and prolong health spans, and winning the game-changing investor award at the Hustle Awards 2025. Let's dig in. Hey, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for coming on. So we begin every episode of the podcast with our signature icebreaker question, which is, what's your favorite breakfast cereal and why?
The icebreaker answer to that is I don't have any. I do not eat cereal for breakfast. For the matter of fact, I do not eat breakfast at all. So that's an honest answer.
Yeah. Do you know what, though? I think that's our most common answer now. They either don't eat cereal or don't eat breakfast.
The only occasion when I do eat, I don't eat cereal at all. I eat oats. And that happens only when I have a long training session ahead of me in the morning. So if I'm running 20 plus K, this is where it's oats. Otherwise, nothing till 12 a.m., p.m., midday.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. So would you be able to introduce yourself and tell me about your background?
Sure thing. So my name is Sergey. I am managing partner and the founding partner of LongeVC 1, LongeVC 2, as well as a bunch of other kind of infrastructural plays that we have built throughout the years in the longevity field, such as, for example, the Longevity Science Foundation, which is our nonprofit that distributes non-dilutive grants to scientists and the working on fundamental tech in aging and aging biology, which is not yet fit for VC. I am so by educational background, I am quantitative methods person, so statistics. Originally, by professional background, I started the founder's journey really early. So I started at the age of 22 with the first company in engineering. I wanted to end up in life sciences originally. And so the first one was in engineering. The second company, age 24, 25, was in medical devices, in drug-eluting coatings, to be precise. Then I decided, well, it's about time to go deeper into pharma and therapeutics, because therapeutics, ending up with therapeutics was ultimately the goal. And that was my definition of what life sciences were for me. So spent another few years working together with other founders to help them fundraise, help them kind of figure out their fundraising strategy, regulatory strategy, IP protection strategy. And I did so in the field of age-related diseases. So that was pretty successful. Then I met Gary, my partner in the first fund and in the second fund now. We've built another company together. And that company was one of the first ones in the market with a way of extracting anonymized metadata from hospitals, any other patient custodian institutions. So we managed to basically get the data about the patients out of the hospital without compromising any kind of data safety regulations. And that turned out to be extremely useful for speeding up patient recruitment for clinical trials. So we ended up with most of the big pharma using that solution. We then, kind of took a deeper dive and created our own real world data collection framework, electronic consent management framework. So everything kind of around recruiting patients and making them participate in biomedical research. So that company ended up, it's not sold yet, so it's not exited. That company ended up building a couple of very exciting governmental projects, starting from here in Latvia, actually, where I'm now, ending up with, for example, designing the what is called EGP, Emirati Genome Program, which is the national genome program of the UAE. So that was that. And then in 2021, me, Gary, and our third partner, India, we came together and kind of started to think how to really make sense of our sporadic investment activities to date, right? Gary was investing heavily himself as a business angel. I mean, I was a founder. Ilya was starting to invest as well. And we did accumulate quite a bit of connections in the world of biotech and in terms of early access to tech in biotech. So we had first-hand relationships with all the major academic institutions. But then we also grew up together with the longevity field, because longevity field was kind of emerging out of biotech in its own right, starting 2016, 2017. So we grew up with all the KOLs in the space as well. And we ended up with a concept of a fund, a very pragmatic fund, really, very pragmatically looking at what longevity is and how longevity can be an investable kind of product. And this is how in 2021, LongeVC One was started. And was started really around our access to tech, early tech, and as well our ability to put together, I think, the best scientific advisory board out there, consisting of those KOLs that emerged pretty much together with us from that space. So yeah, that's I think the short version of the story.
Yeah, great. My next one was going to be what is LongeVC, but I think you've covered that. But I think, what is your main mission at the fund?
I think it's a bit, look, whenever the funds start to talk about the missions and whatever, I kind of stop listening,
Mhm.
to be completely honest, because a venture capital fund is a vehicle that is supposed to multiply capital. And then the real question is, what do you want to achieve along the way of capital multiplication? Because a VC is an exercise of earning more money to your LPs, right? If that is sprinkled with a vision and a mission, that's great. But whenever a manager says that, it's all about the mission and I don't care about anything else, that's not true. I mean, you go and start a nonprofit if that's your gig, and then it's totally fine. But it's not VC. So longevity was basically created for us to make a point about how a longevity market and longevity tech can be, with a pragmatic outlook and a kind of a pragmatic take of what longevity is, can be an investable product and can be a turf to create success stories to lure even more unspecialized capital in. So our thesis, which back in the days was very unpopular, because most of the capital that was deployed in longevity was deployed in holistic, fighting aging type of tech. So people, were basically investing in holistic theses, saying, well, let's cure aging. Right? You almost had these two camps where one camp says, let's cure aging, and then age-related diseases never happens. Cancer never happens if you cure aging, which is, it's a weak, it's a fairly weak cause effect. But yeah, I mean, cancer risk increases with aging. You cannot really battle that. And then the second camp, which was very unpopular, said, well, let's solve age-related diseases one by one. And then by doing so, this is how you understand aging. And we belong very specifically in this second camp. So we really created longevity around our own understanding of what longevity field is. And that is the field where multiple areas and kind of multiple tech areas are actually working together. And we're talking less traditional biotech, such as regenerative medicine, more traditional biotech, engineering, AI, you name it. So all merged together in order to achieve one very specific endpoint, and that is health span prolongation. So prolonging healthy human performance, so more quality years, really, not physically, just prolonging lifespan. That's not important, but prolonging healthy years. And in our investment thesis, we did exactly this. The first fund has deployed capital over therapeutics, and this is where we look at approaches that have a potential for disease modifying solution. And by disease modifying, I mean actually solving the disease in specific disease domains. And this is where we've looked specifically at the ability of our space, longevity space, to finally combine the findings that we had in the aging research and aging biology with more traditional biotech approaches in terms of the disease focus, et cetera, because you cannot avoid those. The regulators still demand it, right? So you need to adapt to the realities of this world. We've also deployed in diagnostics selectively, and this is where we think a huge impact can be made if you deploy in areas where there is a very acute unmet need. And this is where, for example, we were behind, very early investors behind, the only working technology as of now to diagnose ovarian cancer based on blood in stage 1. Before that, it was impossible. As well as we've spent quite a bit of time with the infrastructural solutions, and infrastructural meaning AI for drug discovery, de novo protein sequencing, so novel sequencing methods, everything that helps us to design drugs faster. Right, so a very pragmatic outlook, really, which played out pretty well for us. So coming back to your question of what's the mission, look, the mission is, of course, ending up with better patient outcomes, right? And I am a rare disease patient myself, so I know exactly, what rare disease patients feel, especially in the areas which are considered to be an unmet need in pharma, right? Where you don't have a treatment at all, or you have a treatment which is not effective. So the standard is very poor. But it would be, I guess, unfair to say that, a venture capital fund is only about patient impact. It is, but you achieve it if you do your work as an investor well. And if you do your work as an investor well, you also achieve your kind of capital multiplier. And that allows you to put together the second fund, the third fund, etc., and move on with your mission and your impact and whatever that is. That's, I think, the key.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned some of the areas that you've already invested in. Are there other areas of biotech that you're interested in investing in the future?
The biotech is a bit of an umbrella term in the same way as longevity is an umbrella term, right? So we're very focused on applying aging biology to age-related diseases. That's that's our key takeaway, as well as we're very focused on deploying capital in our second fund, which is being raised right now, for example. It's going to be therapeutics plus infrastructure. So these will be two key areas. So we either solve age-related diseases and we understand because the longevity field has evolved. It has evolved from just talking generally about the role of senescent cells and, telomeres and whatever into evolving in specific therapies that have an endpoint that can be measurable in a clinical trial setting. So suddenly we now have a bunch of longevity tech that is focused enough to sustain a meaningful conversation with a regulator, with FDA, with EMA, whatever, and be allowed into human clinical trials. And we have such companies in Fund One portfolio already, which is very encouraging. So it's the focus is still the same. It's the laser focus that we have. The whole team. So we have a huge team. The deal team is 7 people, right? And LongeVC, which is quite big for a venture capital fund of any size. And plus the scientific advisory board, which is another 14 people. So everything is built to achieve kind of this scientific excellence in due diligence and a very pragmatic take of how we evaluate these companies.
Yeah, great. So how do you think that your previous experience being a founder kind of within the space has impacted how you invest?
Uh, well, I mean, it's a mixed bag of experiences, right? So as a founder, you kind of understand what sort of struggles the companies are going through, especially in the early stages when you have a lot to prove, when you have a lot of variables that are unclear on the table, especially the regulatory, the first clinical, preclinical readouts, etc. But it does help in terms of weeding out wishful thinking.
Hmm.
So you see wishful thinking from a mile away because you did it yourself, right? And you understand how founders sometimes tend to, not because they're bad personalities or whatever, but when you spend a lot of time with something, you sometimes lose the ability to evaluate it critically, I guess.
Hmm.
And whenever you, let's say you have, clinical data that you need to evaluate or any other variables that have certain degree of freedom when it comes to their interpretation, this is where wishful thinking kicks in. And sometimes founders want to see something that is not really there. But it's not their problem, it's your problem as an investor to spot it and then, provide an unbiased view of what's really happening or what you think is really happening.
Hmm.
So that's one. But then all the normal struggles with fundraisings and with whatever. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And then you have another decent pieces of experience. I mean, as a patient and as a founder in the space, I do understand patient journey pretty well.
Hmm.
And whenever you're looking at solutions that are patient facing or physician facing, which is where we don't really invest in those. We only invest in hardcore therapeutics. But once in a while, it still kind of ends up on the desk. You'll very often realize that founders have not done their homework in terms of really understanding how patients behave and how physicians behave, for example. And sometimes these solutions, great on paper, actually create more friction in the patient journey or the healthcare practitioner journey. So things like that, like it's almost like coming to a car repair station and having some background in terms of how to mend cars, right? Although you're not doing it yourself anymore, but you kind of understand what is the mechanic doing with your car anyway. So there is a bit less room to end up disappointed.
Mhm.
Call it that way.
Yeah. So, are there any qualities that you look for or that you've identified that make a startup investable in the early stages?
I don't think there is a recipe. I mean, a lot of funds standardize it all the way to standardizing the valuation, etc. I don't think it's applicable in biotech. Everyone is different. Even several companies being nominally kind of on the same level of development, they would have very different data, very different sometimes mode of IP ownership, everything. So it's always ad hoc kind of case by case evaluation. But really, what you're looking for a blend between the entrepreneurial and technical component in the team. So investing in science only teams is a bad sport. You need someone to be able to talk with the industry early, to communicate the demands of the industry. Because in the very same way as in software, you have this problem of if you don't get out of the building straight away and start talking to the market and to the users, you're risking, building something that people actually don't need, right? So it's overcomplicated. So in biotech, you have the same thing. Sometimes, scientific teams are very excited about a modality or a disease indication or anything or, preclinical data that they have. And the industry doesn't need it, right? Because like it just doesn't. And you are bound to be doing something that the industry needs right now because these are your strategic partnerships as you go. You cannot survive, in a complete vacuum. So that's one. IP ownership for sure. This is something that you see very vastly different across different geographies. So US has pretty much nailed IP transfer from, let's say, a big university into a company, a spin out. Europe is still catching up. There are bizarre, actually, I mean, you're in UK, so UK is guilty of several absolutely bizarre IP transfer practices
Hmm.
and university equity ownership practices in these companies
Hmm.
that are spin outs that I've seen in my life. I mean, so I've seen tech, literally seen tech coming out of European institutions that is potentially very promising. Like it's great. The science team is great, but it's not investable. The cap table from the get go is not investable at all because the university has 40% of that equity in it,
Hmm.
and that's about it. So you are spending time on that for sure. And I think this is the most pragmatic component here. Like it's either acceptable or not acceptable for you. Yeah, that being said, the absence of wishful thinking and degrees of freedom and data interpretation, you kind of just look at how the team positions its product and whether they don't really try to overinflate what is actually there. It's good to be excited about the science you're doing. It's not good to be overly excited about things that are not there. Right. Yeah, I think these are kind of your main. Oh, and in longevity, you have this. I actually have this on the slide in one of my talks, usually whenever I talk about investing in longevity, and that is prolonging rodent lives doesn't make it a company,
Hmm.
right? So if you made mice live longer in a lab, that's great. That's great for mice, right? I mean, all credit to you. It doesn't make it a company. We are super good in, treating stuff in dogs and, combating Alzheimer's and smaller animals and whatever. It doesn't, as long as it doesn't translate into humans, it doesn't, as long as it doesn't have a clinical program behind it, meaningful conversations with the industry, and the other like 15 components, that's a science project. And
Hmm.
that's by far one of the biggest misconceptions that we see kind of company to company. So look, I didn't give you any super enlightening, I guess, tips here, but it's really very pragmatic. I would like to say that we're looking at the track record of the founders. Yes and no, actually. Sometimes you have, young PhDs spinning out their PhD research out of the lab in Harvard.
Hmm.
and they don't have track record of exits before, it doesn't make their science worse because of that. I mean, you got to start somewhere. So you're kind of actually pretty open-minded about this, maybe versus things like fintech and more traditional kind of software
Hmm.
approaches.
Yeah. And I think it's always quite interesting talking with investors and seeing kind of what qualities they say, because some people do say some solid qualities in a founder, but other people, I think, kind of like you, that you're looking at the entire picture of the founder, the company, and everything around that.
Yeah, because it can fail in all, like in a million ways,
Hmm.
in an absolute million ways. And I can't say we've paid for it with our own money back in the days investing
Hmm.
privately. Like you get these lessons by making mistakes, really. Like you can listen to whatever amount of podcasts people saying not do this and not do that, but then until you actually do it yourself and you feel it, then the
Hmm.
lesson is not learned.
Yeah, you got to learn it by feeling that pain. So I think
For
it's a
sure.
good segue on to my next question, which is longevity had zero write-offs in its first fund. What do you think led to this success?
Due diligence. Due diligence. Access, access to deals. So access to meaningful deals, which is we don't invest from the market. We get allocations because of, our track record in the industry and our scientific advisory board and kind of ability to build these relationships with other funds, with the research institutions, with smaller kind of aging research groups. So we have access to, I think, already at the pipeline intake point, we have access to quality tech. Right. That being said, by the way, I mean the first fund has looked at 2,700 companies,
Hmm.
2,700, and has invested in 20. So that gives you a rough estimation of the conversion rate, right? But so it's good quality of science at the intake originally, and then it's just science DD. We've
Hmm.
invested every single cent the first fund had in management fees plus our own money into building the team that is capable of evaluating science, right? And evaluating these, or estimating rather, the viability of translatability of that science from animal to human. Because if you're doing early stage investing in biotech in general, you're looking at a bunch of animal data, right?
Hmm.
And then the biggest question that you have universally, it can be a longevity company, a rejuvenation company, whatever that is. If it worked in non-human primates, will it work in humans? Right? And if it worked in human non-human primates is actually the easiest one, but if it worked in mice, will it translate in humans, like in a much, much, much
Hmm.
more complicated organism, right? That's it. And there is no secret sauce. I just, that being said, there were deals that I think we missed
Hmm.
that we should have invested in, but we passed because there were things that we were absolutely unconvinced in terms of hypotheses, scientific
Hmm.
hypotheses. And you have a bunch of those early stage anyway, right? So it's just a game of you believe in this or you don't believe in this, right? And what sort of proof do you have to believe in this? So I think we've missed a couple good
Hmm.
companies, really good companies that we didn't invest in because of this vigorous process. So, but they want the game.
Yeah, true. So you also won Game Changing Investor at the Hustle Awards this year. So congratulations on that. How did that make you feel, and what does that mean for longevity?
Well, so I think, well, thank you first and foremost. But we've I think it's maybe we kind of approach it as a statement to us doing something right,
Hmm.
right? And I think we're happy that our thesis resonates, and kind of the field that we're playing in is new, but it's very impactful for sure. And we're happy that we can perform in that emerging field, because emerging fields are very much like, kind of undiscovered waters very often in terms of investment. You kind of don't know what works, what doesn't work. So there are no preset patterns really by others. You are the one setting patterns. So we're just happy for the acknowledgement really, and that our work has been spotted in this way. At the end of the day, look, we actually think that way, right? So we firmly believe that longevity is the industry with the highest added value.
Hmm.
right? So the point is, whatever, and biotech in general, but longevity specifically now, because it is emerging as the dominant kind of force on biotech, because biotech is switching from maintaining diseases to actually solving diseases, and this is where we play. But realistically, whenever you let's say you become a patient or you see a patient with an age-related disease, chances are that extremely high chances, like 90+% chances are that the treatment and the protocol that this patient is receiving, be it cancer, be it multiple sclerosis, be it anything else, was once funded by a VC,
Hmm.
right? Because pharma doesn't invent things in-house. Pharma is responsible for, on average 10% of tech invented in-house or developed in-house. Everything else is acquired from small biotechs. And the fuel for small biotechs is venture capital. So people that assume the most risk for the most reward, for sure, but the most risk at the very early stage. So, we're obviously happy that someone noticed, right? The things that we're doing. I mean, we became pretty, I think, pretty well established in our own space already, and
Hmm.
we're happy that we're going beyond.
Well, great, and congratulations. And kind of moving more into the story of longevity, what do you think have been some of the biggest challenges so far?
So, well, I mean, look, this is the first time. It was the first time fund of ours, LongeVC one. Raising a first time fund is hard,
Hmm.
and it took us 30% of our own money actually to be put in, right? To get the rest 70. So that's one. So fundraising, huge challenge. B, proving to the industry, which was living in a slightly different paradigm, that our approach is still legitimately longevity focused, but much more pragmatic and much more workable when it comes to looking at the field as an investment opportunity rather than an exciting biology type of opportunity.
Hmm.
Right. So we had our own kind of curve when we proved that our thesis focusing on diseases rather than just general rejuvenation or general fighting aging will be beneficial. So that's another challenge. Putting together a capable team that has a good chemistry, right? Huge challenge. Takes a lot of effort and luck, actually. I think. Look, everything. Like if you think about it, not none of this stuff is just given. You spend time on all of it, starting from your fundraising activity, ending up with the portfolio companies you ended up with. Because if you go deep down the rabbit hole, it's still a game of probability. Okay, not luck, call it probability to be able to be, in the same room with these founders that you've invested in eventually, and having looked at this company that you've invested in eventually, etc. So none of this is really playbook.
Hmm.
I'd honestly call it that way. And then of course the challenge is I think it's getting easier and easier to do it. Back in the days, it was harder. It's drawing a line between where longevity ends and traditional biotech begins. And the challenge really is not really drawing the line, but not drawing the lines. That's the
Hmm.
challenge, because we actually do not like this conversation. Whenever people say, "Well, this is traditional biotech and this is longevity," well, it's not true. Longevity is basically just a more complete version of biotech when we're talking about really same issues, just a slightly different biological, maybe a slightly more courageous biological approach to these issues, and a slightly more ambitious end goal, right? Rather than just maintaining these diseases and just calling it a day. And the commercial success, you try to go beyond, right? So it's almost like having a purpose in life versus just hanging around. So yeah, I think these are your major challenges.
Yeah. I guess, like, on the flip side of that, what do you think have been some of the highlights so far?
Exactly, being able to do these things that I've just listed as challenges.
Hmm.
That's the flip. So these are the highlights, right? Being able to communicate the vision, being able to prove that this makes sense financially, being able to eventually, split. meaningfully split biotech and longevity, or rather prove that they should not be split. They should be looked at kind of two different families of approaches, really, but we're still doing the same thing. We're still doing the same goal. And the industry doesn't really need to be arrogant saying, well, cancer patients are already patients, so we don't care about them. This is for biotech to deal with, and then we're only dealing with healthy people that want to live to 150. Right? So that's garbage. So like, the inclusiveness, I think the inclusiveness of the thesis is key. And I believe, look, I don't want to credit us for doing that solo, right? But I believe with our contribution to this, the industry is kind of getting a more wholesome appearance in that regard.
Yeah. I think kind of like with the challenges that you stated earlier, what do you think have been the lessons that you've learned from those challenges?
Well, it's hard to say. It's an iterative process. The biggest lesson is whenever you're proving a point, you should be prepared for a very bumpy ride in the very beginning, because you will have a lot of pushback, at least ideological, but also, on the fundraising front, for example. When you've proven your point, everyone will take it as granted, right? So the biggest lesson is you really, if you want to prove your thesis, you are not doing it for the sake of glory from the industry or anything like that. You're just doing it for the sake of proving the thesis. And if that thesis will get picked up by others afterwards, even if the others will pretend that, that's the way it should be, right? And then, they always thought like that as well. You shouldn't be really upset about it. You should consider it to be actually job ideally done. That's it.
Great. So what does the future hold for LongeVC? Do you have any big plans coming up that you can discuss?
Yeah, second fund. I mean, we're now in the fundraising process for the second fund. It's going to be a larger vehicle. I think the first closing announcement will come out pretty soon. And same focus, just more dry powder for us to execute on the vision. I think that's the biggest plan so far. We also do have quite a bit of active work going on in our sister fund, which is called LongeVC. It's also a US-based vehicle. It is dealing with animal health and animal longevity specifically, which is surprisingly underfunded as a market, interestingly enough. Although very capable of paying, because people, pay for their pets sometimes much more actively than they pay for themselves when it comes to treatments and kind of wellness and well-being. So, we're just expanding again, iteratively expanding on our ecosystem. We're scaling our efforts. Nothing extraordinary, just building on top of what we already built as a foundation.
Yeah, great. Well, that comes to my final question, which is, did you have anything else to add or plug at the end of the podcast?
No, I think I'm okay. Again, thank you very much for recognizing us. And I think my biggest message here is the more joint success stories we create as a field, the more actors come in, the more stakeholders come in, the more awareness we raise. And for those of those who will be listening, I just really want to emphasize again that without the longevity field, without solving the issues we're solving, which is give or take premature death, right? Nothing else will make sense. None of your crypto will make sense. None of your fintech will make sense. SaaS, enterprise SaaS, name any, right? It will not make sense if you don't solve this fundamental issue that everyone has. And in a very interesting way, the issue of longevity and premature dying and kind of, these health risks equalizes everyone without looking at their social status or the tax bracket, if you wish. It's just universal for everyone. So the more people we have, the more awareness we have as a field. I'm not saying investing, but really just being interested in it, the better.
Well, amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Sergey. And once again, congratulations on winning Game Changing Investor at the Hustle Awards.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and check out Startup Magazine's socials to stay up to date on the latest startups news.